Pandemics, tragic losses will take years to recover, but there's an opportunity right now that educators and the policymakers and taxpayers who support them could seize. Hi, my name is Beth Hawkins. I'm the senior writer and national correspondent for the 74 Million. I've written a series of stories about the ways in which the COVID-caused recession has shown up in cities throughout the United States and the challenges that's going to present for schools. Those communities are Delaware, specifically the Wilmington metro area, Austin, Texas, Washington, D.C., Reno, Nevada, and Colorado Springs, Colorado. You may have heard economists refer to the pandemic-sparked recession as a K-shaped recession. So people at the top of the K are doing very well. In many cases, they're earning more, their jobs are being created at a much higher pace, they're barely feeling the recession at all. But they're ordering luxury items and expensive meals online instead of spending money at the local businesses that employ their lower-income neighbors. As those restaurants, dry cleaners, nail salons, and so forth went dark, workers at the bottom of the K lost their jobs and fell off a financial cliff. We start our series in Delaware. 1 year into the pandemic, employment among low-income Delawareans was down 16%. But it was actually up 1.5% amongst their higher income neighbors. Because those children are not experiencing the recession in the same way, some will show up back at school perhaps having had advantages, while others have struggled on multiple fronts. And when they come back to school, they're going to be going to schools that are historically under-resourced in one of the nation's most inequitable school finance systems in the country. So they will have less resources available to make up lost learning, in some cases a year or two of academic losses on top of their social-emotional losses. So educators now are scrambling to figure out how to provide certain children with more instructional time, more time in class, with specific mechanisms for figuring out which skills they might be missing. Educators in Delaware are optimistic that the depth of the crisis and the stark relief in which the need has been cast will help them to make some long-sought changes, that the need for better funding, more resources, and equity will finally acquire the urgency it needs to create change. In Washington, D.C., more than 2,000 children this year did not show up in kindergarten or pre-kindergarten classrooms. This year's K-shaped kindergarten class will show up in D.C. with children who are ahead and children who may be several years behind. On Capitol Hill, which is on one side of the Anacostia River, which might as well be an economic moat, median household income is $126,000 a year. COVID left those neighborhoods relatively unscathed. Those children were home in homes with resources. Across the river, median family income is $36,000 a year, which obscures the fact that the poorest tracts, which contain some of the nation's oldest public housing, it's as low as $20,000. The excellent news about Washington, D.C. is that the city for several years has had universal preschool that's free and available to all children in D.C., and that has enabled the public school system to acquire a great deal of information about what does and doesn't work to get the youngest learners on track for success later in life. If they heed their data and they attend to how to get schools ready for this array of needs that are going to show up, D.C. should be better positioned than many communities to meet the need. In Austin, Texas, a red-hot economy by traditional means has caused problems for the lowest income residents. More than 35 companies moved to the city in 2020, creating 10,000 jobs. That's good news for high-income workers whose employment was up in the first year of the pandemic. Their low-income neighbors didn't do so well, as the businesses that they worked in, leisure, hospitality, restaurants, those sorts of things, transportation, were closed. What this means is that when children come back in August to Texas classrooms, residents of Austin will be looking at a variety of academic needs. What we know about suspected pandemic learning losses is that it may widen this array of needs by 2 or more years. So a single teacher may face the daunting task of trying to reach kids at 7 grade levels. Located in one of the Austin neighborhoods where this income inequality is most on display, a school called NYOS, which stands for Not Your Ordinary School, has been experimenting with a system of meeting each child's individual needs by providing them with academic material that's right where they are. And this positions them to be a model for other schools as they seek to serve their kids coming out of the pandemic. What this means is that NYOS has become good at allowing children to progress through academic material at their own pace. Coming out of the Great Recession of 2008, Reno, Nevada decided that it was time to make some major structural changes to its economy, which in the past had not required a highly educated workforce and had relied on hospitality and gaming. That collapsed in the wake of the Great Recession. Nevada was able to attract Elon Musk's Tesla, the Gigafactory, and has partnered with Washoe County Schools to train young people to work in these high-tech industries without necessarily having a college degree. They looked at their top performers during the first couple of years of the Gigafactory's operations and realized that the employees who were the most innovative, who were the best at problem solving, who had the best critical thinking skills, were all veterans of school robotics clubs. So Tesla has invested in Washoe County Schools robotics clubs in the hopes of growing the next generation of diverse critical thinkers. Colorado Springs is trying a radical experiment. Superintendent Michael Thomas asked his board to sign off on a policy that would align resources with need and to look at everything through a prism of equity. So as Colorado Springs goes to address unmet learning, trauma, other issues that have shown up as a result of the pandemic, he's going to be able to deploy his people, his money, his innovations in a way that will direct the most to the neediest children. If Thomas is successful, it will be interesting to see whether it delivers on the promise of American education as the great equalizer. It will deliver tremendous learning along the way about where the political pressure points are, and it may provide some models for places that are attempting to break with old practices and find new ways to reach the kids who come to school with the largest needs. If the United States is going to have a healthy economy, if we're going to be prepared for the next crisis, we're going to need to deal with income inequality as it shows up in our schools. We're going to need to take people's newfound awareness of the scarcity that may attend their neighbor's home and use that to create the political will to solve some of these issues.